Everyone here, speakers, sponsors, attendees, is playing a crucial role in supporting non-focused missions on promoting open practices in research, data, and scientific computing. So thank you everyone for showing up and supporting our mission. So one of PyData's mission is to create a community where we learn from one another. So we have lightning talks. They're 5-minute talks, and it's a great way to share your knowledge with one another. Signups are going to be available at the non-focused table on the 5th floor, and talks are going to be held at the end of Friday. And we'd like to extend a thank you to our sponsors for making this conference a reality. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our first keynote speaker. Amanda Silver is a corporate VP and head of product for Microsoft's developer division, whose mission is to empower developers and their teams to achieve more. So let's give Amanda a warm round of applause.
All right, so let me just start by introducing myself. My name is Amanda Silver. I've been at Microsoft now for 23 years. I've always worked on behalf of developers as my customers, in part because I'm really inspired by all of you. You guys are the creators. You are the ones who actually create the future. And what I do today is I'm head of product for our developer division at Microsoft. So the way that you can think about that is that we build basically all of the products that developers use: Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, .NET, TypeScript, our contributions to the Python community, C++, also our Azure Application platforms. So all of that, Azure DevOps, and obviously we collaborate very, very closely with the GitHub team, which you'll see a lot about in our demos. All of that is basically kind of the gist of what our team does. In addition, that's kind of half of my role at Microsoft. And then the other dimension of my role at Microsoft is I'm the general manager for our internal engineering systems. So we have over 60,000 engineers at Microsoft, and you can think about how do we actually support all of our engineers to make sure that they're very productive, but also that they're building secure, compliant, high quality code. And so that's kind of the other dimension of my job. So let's just start first with what Microsoft has been doing in open source and with the Python community. One of the things that has been certainly a wild ride over the past few years has been the growth of the Visual Studio products in terms of the popularity of them, especially as we started to extend beyond the .NET community and the C++ community into Python, into JavaScript and Node and TypeScript. Today the Visual Studio family is some of the most popular developer products in the world, and we have a really dedicated team that Courtney works with very closely. Courtney will be joining me a little bit later. That actually works very much on the Python extensions inside of Visual Studio Code. We also have a faster CPython team inside of Microsoft that we created in 2021. And this is really folks who have super deep knowledge of Python at the runtime layer that are really spending 100% of their time, sponsored by Microsoft obviously, but led by Guido van Rossum, who serves as our distinguished engineer, but basically to improve the speed and the quality and the debugger support, which we also view to be very, very critical in the CPython runtime. And then at GitHub Universe, which was last week, we actually just announced, based on our Octoverse survey, which basically does data analysis on what exists on GitHub, Python has actually, in this last year, become the #1 programming language on GitHub, which is pretty incredible feat. That being said, it is if you count JavaScript and TypeScript as two separate programming languages. But I would say, this is actually a testament to, in a lot of senses, Python's use in the data science community, because part of what we actually see is that it's really the rise of Jupyter Notebooks on GitHub that has actually led to, that incredible rise of Python over the past few years. We also support, via our FOSS fund, which is where Microsoft employees can actually go and nominate, open source organizations that build components that we think are super important. We have a fund where employees can actually nominate those open source teams to be sponsored. And obviously we support the Python Software Foundation. So, definitely a lot of energy is being spent on Python. So what we want to talk about today, and really what I want to get to as soon as I possibly can, is really demos of showing you guys how we can actually use our Visual Studio products or GitHub products kind of together to actually make you more productive. Because at the end of the day, what we obsess about at Microsoft is literally every second that you spend coding. How can we make that more enjoyable? How can we make that more productive? And that's really what we end up talking about at work. So, I've been working on GitHub Copilot now for 3, 4, 5 years. We actually had a precursor to GitHub Copilot that we started a little bit earlier. So using AI as a feature and kind of developing AI has actually been something that has also been a wild ride. We've been learning a lot. And in terms of what we see for our customers, we actually see AI being applicable in many, many different ways. I'm sure many of you guys are facilitating your organizations to do a lot of this. But really, how do you think about where you can apply AI? For a lot of folks, they actually need some energy in terms of doing that initial round of brainstorming, right? They think AI is cool. I'm starting to kind of understand kind of how it works, but I don't really know where to apply it to my organization. And what we're finding is that actually some of the strongest applications of it are actually for your internal business processes, first and foremost, and employee experiences, because when you apply it in that context, there's just no question it's valuable to the organization. For us, as an example, obviously we have huge support costs in terms of supporting our customers that are using Azure, using Windows, whatever it is. And one of the places that we've applied AI internally is to basically provide knowledge bases to our support engineers so that they can actually help our customers resolve issues more quickly. And so I think if you take that kind of mindset and bring it back to your organization, I think you're going to find many, many different applications of where you could put it. We have obviously lots and lots and lots of different examples of companies that have applied Microsoft's AI platform to their use cases. But this goes across not just the customer-facing applications, but also just the employee workflows, making internal knowledge more accessible. In a lot of senses, I think AI really changes the user experience paradigm because today when you're doing search and you have to navigate a website, a lot of times you're doing hunting and pecking throughout that website to try to find the knowledge. And in a lot of senses, what AI can actually do is bring that knowledge base to you ambiently and intelligently at the place that you need it, when you need it. So, we'll show you a little bit of this in a second, but one of the things that we really want to focus on is making it easy for you to quick start your development of building an AI application. And so, as an example, what we've been working on and just announced last week at GitHub Universe is this AI app template gallery. And Don, who will be coming up a little bit later to show you this, we've really been trying to make sure that we have great representation across all of the programming languages and all of the different types of applications that you might want to be building with this. And while these are kind of quick start solutions, they really span not just building an initial application, but also different types of technologies that you may end up using, even those outside of Microsoft. So for example, we have LangChain, Arise, Pinecone examples in this AI application gallery. We've been working across the ecosystem to support it. Now, in addition to it, we also have reference architectures that you can check out just to understand how you can kind of bring all of these different solutions together. This one was inspired by Telecom, but really just brings together our OpenAI capabilities along with Azure Functions, along with semantic kernel, orchestration, API management to serve large document summarization. Now, as I said, at the end of the day, what's incredible about what you can do with AI especially the large language models, is to provide that knowledge base to the user in the context that they need. Another good example is knowledge mining for enterprise search. We have pretty great enterprise search capabilities kind of built into the Azure application itself, Azure platform itself, where all you need to do is kind of walk up, give it a knowledge base of documents, and then from there you can kind of move on. So, I think, in a lot of senses, this is really just actually starting to change user expectations in terms of what they can expect from their interaction with applications. Now let's talk a little bit about the AI application platform, and we'll be getting to demos in a second. Our goal here is that we want to make it so that you can use the tools that you already know and love, whether that's Visual Studio Code or notebooks or GitHub. You can use all of that to basically access the Azure application platform. And so, given the technical foundation of the Azure infrastructure, which is basically, obviously optimized to train OpenAI itself, at that level, you can basically access that same kind of infrastructure to train your own models. Or if you're not doing your own model training, or maybe you're doing small model training so that it can supplement or augment the foundational model, that's also really easy to do. And so our goal here is to provide you with the core AI infrastructure that at the foundational level, the data services, because obviously you need to access the data to do that training, the app services, because you're probably going to be exposing this in the context of an application, and then obviously the things that are specific to building an AI application, which includes things like orchestration and memory, managing your memory, managing the context windows that you're passing into the large models. So we'll show you some examples of this in a little bit. Just to go a click deeper, you can kind of see, what we're trying to do here is to give you access to every single phase. And in addition to the kind of the core building blocks, we also have at the platform level support for AI security, privacy, safety. We think about this as our responsible AI platform so that you can expunge PII, personal information, from the application so that you can look for things like bias or unsafe content. So you don't have to, the way I think about it is my goal is that developers should not have to write boilerplate code. If there's something that every single one of you guys have to do, I would say things like expunging, PII or getting rid of unsafe content. That's a great example of something that we should be doing at the platform level, and so we do that. So with that, I want to invite Dawn to come up and join me and show you a little bit of a demo of how all this works together.
All right, so I'm an application developer. I promised I wouldn't talk about Django in this presentation, but I'm a Django dev. We'll be talking about Flask. And so as I'm navigating new applications that I don't understand, GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot for Azure has absolutely transformed this experience for me. So what I have on screen is an application built by our colleague, Burke Holland. It was on the stage of GitHub Universe, and it's actually used every day by him and his team. But it's a Node application, and I don't want to get into any Node code. What we start with, just high level, is we're putting in the YouTube video for context. You can have saved and persistence, different prompts. And then you can have a conversation of sorts with GPT-4o, and we also expose the temperature and the messaging up at the top. Great application, it's used in production, but I want to start something on my own, and I know that one of my colleagues contributed a demo of some sort, so I'm going to ask Azure what is, and I'm doing this live and it's stochastic, so let's go. So what is that template? It was Python, OpenAI, I know it's chat, and it was definitely a quick start. From the, and let's give a little more context, the AZD see a template gallery. Let's give me the right answer. Did it a number of times. All right. So just to talk a little bit more about what that template gallery looks like, Amanda already showed it, but if you like the UI kind of component here, here's another version, here's the light theme, I like light theme, and I can also filter it for Python, OpenAI, and other models or databases that I use. So here we go, perfect. It gave me the exact template that I needed. I'm gonna copy this over, and we're really starting from zero. So let me make a directory for this new app. Oops, let's do that in commands, on my commands. cd make, let's make dir, new app, cd new app, and let's put that in there and create this quick start. So it's already installing, and one of the really cool parts also about AZD is that it's easily AZD-uppable. That's how we call it internally, but you just need to write AZD up, and it's in the cloud. Perfect. Project initialized. Let's check our new project and see if there's certain things. So we have the new app. This looks much more familiar to me. I like this. I love these artifacts. And we're going into the source code. And this is a Quart app, and for people who may be familiar, raise your hand if you know Flask or Quart. Okay, cool. Audience knows, we're familiar. It is an asynchronous web application that's based off of Flask. And it looks like the majority of the application is in this chat.py. This is great, I love it. All right, so in this demo, I'm going to go through exploring a new application. I'm going to add some tests. I'm going to add a new feature first, then I'll test. I've not tested development today. And then I'll add some documentation and deploy very, very quickly. Let's see if we can get this done quick. All right, so next I'm going to try to add a new feature. This workspace has the context of my new app and my old app. This is a clone that I tried to do. My social assist app is right here. And we're clicking around, and let's create a prompt. Create prompt is maybe the first part I want to do. And I'm going to go to this chat.py, so the context is open. And I'll ask, I'm not going to ask Azure, I'm going to ask my application, please, because you got to be nice, recreate the functionality. And I'm going to use context from this index.js, this functionality in this application for my chat.py. Actually, let's show off the inline inline feature first. I really enjoy that one. So I'll do Control-I, and I'll do the same thing. Please recreate the functionality of index.js, and we're going to make sure it's create prompt in chat.py. It's chat.py. Perfect. And it should, okay, this looks really good. Okay, so we always review our code. We don't want the AI just kind of taking control and giving me some bunk stuff. It's still loading, but this looks really good. Perfect. I'm gonna accept these changes. All right, so now I also want to create a test for it. I'm gonna open up a new window so I have only this application as my context. Let's open up, oh, also I need to move over my .env file so you all can't see that. Let's do my .env, and we'll move that over to my new app. Yes, move it, perfect. All right, so I only have the context of this window and this new application, and I'm going to start doing tests on my new app. So let's open up that new file, and let's go to my source. I see these tests, this is great. And tests are all linked in one file, so this is great for me. Perfect, so I'm going to Control-I, and I'll say, please create a test to cover the functionality in, spelling's okay, functionality in chat.py, create prompt. All right, let's see what this gives me. All right, the tabbing's a little off, okay, but this looks straightforward and pretty good. So let me shift tab, because we are Pythonistas, we need a tab right. Shift tab, shift tab, finger mess up. All right, and we'll accept that. I like this, I'm excited. Okay, so if I'm running these tests and I'm exploring this code, I need my test setup, and I could just do PyTest in my terminal, but I'm going to ask my workspace, can you help me set up my tests? So these / commands are kind of shortcuts to being able to access certain functionality. So we've pre-written some prompts for you that will be able, so you don't have to do that kind of like prompt engineering testing on this. We've done a couple of those for you. Perfect. So in this, because it's stochastic, it didn't give me this configuration on how to set up tests. Let me see if there are test files in here already that might have helped things. So I'll go into my .vs code, I see my launch.json, and I also see some test settings in here. So let's see, I might also have some test settings in here. So that might be the reason why it already worked. Let's do configure tests. I love it when this happens. Don't you love a demo? Give good energy to apply this configure test button. All right, we have these apply changes, and this is why we do a live demo. Many times it will create a button that will also say configure test, but if I go back to my launch.json, I also have add configuration here too. So we support any way you'd like to do it. So this is gonna be the Python debugger, and we'll also have, Python in here. So let's configure these tests over in here, configure Python tests. I'm gonna wait for it to load. Well, I love this. No. This was the first one that's happened for me. Okay. No, that's additional testing. Well, that's funny, because there's a whole section that you're going to be really impressed with when you see it that has my test running. So it will auto when, it's very, very silly. I love the demo gods for this one. Oh, maybe it's because I have this open. Let's do it again. Let's do setup test, because I'm sure it'll work 100 times over in it. Okay, PyTest. It's being silly for me today. I don't know why this is happening, but we will go back to configure test for the sake of time. Gosh, you got me sweating. What? Okay. Well, we're gonna come back to this one because this one is a really good demo. I really want to show you this, so we're gonna come back to this one for the sake of time. We'll move on to, let's see, what was after testing? Oh, we also want to debug. Okay, so for a debugging extension, we definitely want to, let's ask VS Code to enter the chat, and we'll start debugging. Similar process, this one will work. Work. I can feel your collective positive energy, so it's going, when we go back to test, it will also work as well. Awesome. This looks great. These are adding debugging configurations, and we're going to start debugging our existing application. Oh, let's also add my Python extension. So we're going to select an interpreter, and these are all of the interpreters that are on my machine. I'm going to do 312. The 313 is out. I hope everyone's switching their applications over to 313, and we'll start debugging our existing application. And I actually think that was what was wrong with my testing environment. So we're gonna go back to the test and show you some cool stuff, and I'll do it really quick. Now I have the debugger running. So we're gonna keep seeing it load, and I can open my new application at 50505. Control open. There we go. And it's very slim, lightweight HTML and a little minimal JavaScript, and you have this this chat bar on the bottom where you can start communicating with ChatGPT. I do a little bit more demo, but we ran out of time. But then let's go through it. See, testing works with my extension. User error, not the app. And so then you open up new app, you go to tests, and you can see all of my tests created, and you can also see my additional create prompt tests. So let's run this test demo, and I should see one failing because I just threw in the code. I didn't write anything, but it will give me a great place to start. And as like I expected, there we go. Thanks everyone. Perfect. And then as I go to a new terminal, I'll add a new one. I'll show you how just the beginning parts of how easy it is to just AZD up. So I'm in my application and I do AZD up. I've done absolutely no configuration. I will be honest, I don't understand Bicep yet, but if I wanted to do some peeking around or ask Copilot a little bit more about Bicep, I can just poke around some of these Bicep files and find that same thing. I can select my subscription to use, I'm using one, and we're gonna retrieve locations, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not gonna go through this whole thing, but that's the demo.
All right, so Dawn, kind of show, like what I really wanted Dawn to be able to show you, which I think she did, is that, with the Copilot kind of being in the context of VS Code, you don't have to do the things that are kind of the boilerplate code, the aspects of configuration changes, setting up debug, doing test generation, even documentation, because the Copilot really does that for you so that you can focus on kind of what's unique to your particular application. But, really, part of the thing about modern development is that, it used to be that everything that you were developing was on your local machine. You had your IDE, you had your SDKs, you were debugging, but in the modern world, when you're building a cloud application, you actually have, resources that are managed and being hosted in the cloud. You have a whole set of things that you have to go through in terms of, the testing, the compliance, the analysis of what it actually looks like in the test harness, in the pre-production environment or in your production environment to bring the observability back into your application. And all of that can actually come back into the context of your coding environment so that you can really move as quickly as possible so that you can focus on the ideas and getting them through your fingertips into the machine instead of having to reason about all these different systems and kind of integrate with it. So what Dawn was really showing there is the GitHub Copilot for Azure extension that we just released this past week. You guys can all go get it right now. But essentially what it allows you to do is to quickly figure out how to deploy, how to debug, how to diagnose anything in Azure. You can also get things like your costs. And if you are familiar with another cloud, AWS, GCP, whatever, you can ask questions to the Azure kind of oracle in a sense to say, well, what's the equivalent of the EKS service or something in AWS in Azure? So it actually makes it a lot easier to kind of learn Azure. Now, one of the things that we've been really trying to think about is what's super unique that we could bring to this environment based on the knowledge that we have. And so one of the very common kind of challenges that developers are faced with is optimizing their applications. They don't necessarily know how to do performance profiling. It's almost a pretty sophisticated developer task, and a lot of people don't know the profiling tools, and maybe they don't have the right observability hooked up into, or the right telemetry hooked up into their applications. And so our question is kind of like, how can we actually help developers figure this out? Now, this has been developed specifically for .NET developers, but there's nothing about what I'm going to show you here that couldn't also be applied for Python over the long term. But the reason why I want to talk to you guys about this is because this is a good example of a custom model that we've actually been developing inside of Microsoft, for the purpose of improving the developer experience. And so I just want to talk with you guys a little bit about how we go through that. So essentially what we've done is we've taken the call stacks, we've taken kind of the traces of execution of .NET applications, thousands of .NET applications that are running internally inside of Microsoft, and we've used that as our training set to actually create our own custom model so that we can actually help developers improve the performance of their applications. So just to kind of, describe how we go through this, we basically collected all of these performance traces from more than 1,000 internal Microsoft applications, millions of call stacks across Azure, Microsoft 365, Teams, Bing, etc. We then ran an unsupervised learning and pattern mining process over that to actually build the model itself. And things like looking for common API calls, regex patterns, etc. And then that model actually can do and look at any kind of performance trace, and based on the changes of what we see and what performs better, it can actually make recommendations to the developer as to how to improve it. And then we kind of incorporated this into our application experience. Just to show you an example of I know flame charts, we all love flame charts, but this is really an example of the data set that we used to actually train this model. And obviously we collected thousands of them. And I think as many of you guys as machine learning developers kind of recognize, there's constantly this tension between the accuracy of the model that we're developing, the cost of the model that we're developing, and the time, because especially in the context of, for us, we build highly interactive developer tools. Your expectations as a developer is that it's instantaneous. You get a result back instantaneously. If you have to wait, hours for you to actually get a performance analysis, that is actually going to be too long for that to be actionable. So we really have to kind of make sure that we develop this in a way that is going to return quickly. So, the first step that we had to go through is just to kind of build that model to detect kind of, what is the context and how do we actually give you the performance insights so that you can, improve the performance of the application. This has all been published in that paper that you see linked there, a scientific paper that our data science team actually published to help you all understand how do we do this kind of training. It's about to fast forward on Don's machine. And then what we do after that is we really kind of work on the user experience. Once we have a model that we feel like has the high accuracy, we then work on improving the user experience so that we're actually surfacing it in the right way with the right user experience to the user to make sure that it's actually highly actionable for that user. And so we really had to kind of figure out, okay, how do we actually suggest this in a way that the developer can actually recognize that this is going to improve their performance at the right time. And we developed a model that we call Deep Dev as part of this. Deep Dev is actually used in many, many, many places across our GitHub Copilot experience. This is just an example of one of the applications of it. And then lastly, just kind of the automation of this. The only thing that's better than providing a tool to a developer that gives them insight is to also help them actually apply the insight to fix the code. With the way that we talk about it at work is the idea that found equals fixed, right? So if we can actually find the optimization or the security issue or whatever it is, it's just really easy to click a button and to apply that fix there. And so, combining kind of what you saw with this diagnostic model and kind of what Don showed you a second ago, really the way that we think about it is that you have the inner loop of development, which is, your VS Code plus your GitHub Copilot kind of combined together. Maybe sometimes in a code space or a workspace or whatever is the environment that you want to host it in. We have the outer loop, which is basically the CI/CD processes that are hosted in GitHub Actions or in Azure DevOps or whatever you choose to use as your CI environment. But essentially taking the repos, the advanced security checks for static analysis to look for things like secrets that are in code or other things like that so that you don't make mistakes and kind of publish that publicly. But then we take the production environment, which is basically all of your Azure infrastructure, and we use that as actually a dynamic knowledge base that we then feed back into the GitHub Copilot for Azure extension. And so this is both a combination of all of the static knowledge that we have in Microsoft Learn, for example, but also things like dynamic data. So we can take things like that optimization model that I showed you a second ago and combine that with the active call stack for your application to actually give you insights into your running environment. And so, you know, one of the things that we've really learned, in a sense, all of this is what I would call an intelligent app. Any app that uses AI as a part of kind of, you know, the app experience overall is what I would call an intelligent app. And, you know, intelligent apps, they provide that personalization. Being able to have the context of your running code, that's a form of personalization. You know, they use obviously, like, you know, traditional apps have static, you know, environments, but they're also really costly to update. You know, if there's a feature that you want to be able to give to your users, you actually need to issue a new release to be able to get that. But what's incredible about, you know, intelligent applications is that your model can actually dynamically get better over time based on more knowledge that we're passing into it. And, you know, the other thing here is that traditional apps use more traditional user interfaces, but intelligent apps really offer the opportunity to have much more natural user interfaces, much more ambient AI, using the context of the environment that the user is interacting with, using natural language as inputs, whether that's written and typed out or, you know, even using voice. And so there's just a lot of ways that the application expectations are really going to change. And we can really anticipate the user's needs and make the applications more responsive, more efficient, and more user-centric, while also continuously improving them. But what this also means is that the expectations for developers really changes as well. So, you know, it means that not just the what you code needs to change, but also the way that you code it. In the past, developers really focused on translating requirements into code and building and testing that functionality through manual coding, manual testing, and really iterative processes. And, you know, continuous improvement really always required a manual task. And so, in a sense, you know, the promise of intelligent apps is that you can actually, you know, dynamically do a lot of that improvement. But to do this, you need to be able to evaluate models. You have to be able to curate data sets to train those models. You have to be able to test on unseen data. You have to be able to continuously optimize the models and the user experience to make sure that you're actually delivering the best user experience to the end user. And you know, I think that this, and we're even experiencing this inside of Microsoft, yes, there's a lot of technical skills that you need to acquire, and I would say everybody in this room is definitely, you know, kind of leading the industry in terms of those technical skills. But there's also culture changes that need to happen internally inside of the organization because the skill sets are so different from what was required previously that we need to focus on things like skilling up developers to get those kinds of experiences, you know, even dimensions of the way that the product manager job has been done in the past changes. The way that we approach doing testing and quality assurance absolutely changes in these kinds of environments. So to show you a little bit of this, I wanted to invite Courtney to show you some demos here.
Perfect. Hi everyone. My name's Courtney and I am on the Python team, Python and AI tools team at Microsoft. We're gonna get our notebook loaded and we're going to extend Dawn's app that does content generation to reference the VS Code release notes to pull in relevant features. That way our content's just a little bit more interesting and a little bit more personalized. And I wish I had a joke in my back pocket. Cool. So the first thing, I'm just gonna run these cells ahead of time quickly to save us time later on. But the first thing that we're gonna do is we're going to just mimic Dawn's app super simply. So I'm gonna start by getting content from a URL and then fetching the content and setting up my system message to get started. And it looks like it's still connecting to the kernel, so we're gonna let that load and then we'll come back to it. Cool. So when we're thinking about our model, we're going to leverage GitHub Models today. GitHub Models has a variety of models from different providers and different capabilities ranging from both embeddings to chat and completions. But we're going to use Forum Mini today. So we'll go to the model page and then get this Get API key. Has lots of good information. I'm going to update my language to Python, of course. And a quick aside is I'm working with Jupyter Notebooks in VS Code, but connected through code spaces. And that connection in code spaces is crucial here because we get to ignore this. Personal access tokens are automatically injected into our code space, so I don't have to sweat over secrets, environment variables, any of that. I just get to go and have fun with the code. So I'm going to come down here and copy the code, and then come back where we have our data, we have our system message, and I'm going to paste this in. And then we'll update this to reference our messages that we added before. We'll run it, and then we'll start thinking about how we can leverage the RAG process to feed in our own data. So great, we have our starter content, but we should be mindful that we're not just gonna dump all of our blog post content into this model. It'd be super heavy, but also very noisy in what it's generating back to us. So I'm gonna leverage our model again to extract key topics. So I'm updating the message, I'm rerunning the model, and hopefully I'll get 5 topics. And we can think of these as our search phrases, our key terms. But the bulk of our work today is going to be in our search base, which is in our VS Code release notes. So I'm leveraging the GitHub API to go and fetch the release notes from the repo, and then coming back in and we can play with it from there. So these first few cells are just helper functions to do that. So I'm fetching all of the files in a subdirectory, I'm getting all the content from a file, and then I'm putting it together, and we have our release notes. As you can see, the VS Code team has a lot of content in their release notes, and it's a little bit overwhelming to look at. So to make this more manageable, we should think about, okay, what's the next step? How can we make this more manageable? We can leverage chunking. And since the VS Code team uses Markdown to format their release notes, we can leverage a Markdown parser to kind of aid us in that. So just before this, I asked Copilot to leverage LangChain's Markdown parser to do that for me. So that's where we're started today. And we're gonna go through this process of cleaning up the data so that way when we feed it into our model, it's just gonna have a better response generated. So the first thing that I see is that only the first chunk in the page content has the date, and we should append the date to all of them so we can work with them in chronological order. So I'm gonna go back up here and highlight, and I'm gonna ask Copilot for help. And again, I'm using inline chat as Don demoed before to help me do that. So I'm gonna say, take the very first line in the first element of, let's see, what's this called, docs contents, and prepend it to the page content of the split object. Cool. Kind of feels like a word salad when I say it out loud, but I think that's all of the relevant variables that I need. And awesome, it looks like Copilot is adding the first line. Let's cross our fingers and run it. Awesome, so I'm seeing the date on each of the chunks now, and now I'm gonna work on the URLs a little bit more. So instead of going to the main page, I'm gonna go to the specific feature that it's talking about. So let's do inline chat again. We're just experimenting and iterating with our data, going through this process. Speed things up, I'm gonna see if voice chat works. Let's see. Hello? Maybe? Disregard splits with headers 1 or 2. For header 3, grab the header text and append it to the end of the URL. Just had to get warmed up there for a second. But it hears me better than I know how to type. So let's see if it can do this. Cool, so let's run it, let's see. Nice, okay, so we have snippets and suggestions, tab completion, all the good things. One more thing that I'm gonna do is instead of linking to the repo and the raw docs, I'm gonna link to the live docs on like code.visualstudio.com. So again, I'm gonna ask Copilot for help because it can quickly iterate, and I'm just gonna copy this so I don't have to, no one has to painfully watch me type out links. Yes. Okay, cool. So again, I'm just asking it to swap the links for me, use regex if it needs to, and I'm hoping it can do that for me because I don't want to do regex. Okay, awesome. So we probably will want to go back later and do some more data cleaning, but I think we're in a good spot to put this back into our model. And I'm gonna just quickly run this cell that's gonna output it as JSON for me, come back to my model exploration page, and we'll load it in. So I'm just gonna hit tab as Copilot is suggesting things for me, and it's suggesting based on both the comment but also the context that it's building within the cell. Cool, so it loaded it in. Let's open it in Data Wrangler. Data Wrangler is a VS Code extension. It's a sandbox environment that allows you to just visualize your data as well as perform some operations on it. And it gives really cool summary statistics as well. So we're seeing that we have over 4,000 distinct values. That's great. And I'm realizing we added the date to all of these, but we didn't filter the date. 2016 is a long time ago. So let's filter this using Data Wrangler for content that contains 2023 or 2024 to get the relevant features. We'll preview it here, so just under 900 rows left, and I'll hit apply. Yay, okay. We have 2023, and if I go long enough, we'll have 2024. Amazing. So like I said, we can perform these operations in the UI, but it also outputs the pandas code that it used to perform those operations for us. So I don't have to look up any of these pandas functions myself. I can just copy the code, take away all this stuff on the screen, and we'll paste it in. So we were just able to get started with our model, load in our data, prep and clean our data iteratively, really fast, and now we're actually ready to perform the text search. And we'll be using VM25 for that. Quick pull of the room, how many people are familiar with VM25 and the RAG process? Okay, so a handful of us. Quick level setting, all it is a ranking function that's gonna help rank our content based on relevance of our query. That's all you need to know. Cool, so let's ask Copilot to help us do that. We're gonna say create a function that performs text search over, and just as Dawn attached file variables, I can attach kernel variables to give it extra context. Using VM25 with our key topics that we did at the beginning, and output the top 10 docs. Cool. So this, hopefully Copilot can help us perform this text search, and if not, if it can't do it, it can at least get us part of the way there. So it looks like it's importing the right libraries. We'll run it. Oh, 10 links. Okay, amazing. So we have our 10 links, we have the content that we want to feed it into, but before I actually run it in the model, we should probably get it down to 3 or 4 links. I don't know, 10 links is a lot. So we can think about semantically re-ranking this. There's a variety of ways that we can do semantic re-ranking. So people use neural networks, but one thing that we can think about and experiment with is leveraging the model. So I'm gonna experiment with that today. So I'm updating the message, I'm rerunning the model, and amazing, okay. So we have our links. We might want to go back and just, I see that we're linking, they're pulling GitHub links, so we might want to go back and fine tune this later on, clean things up a little bit more, and go through that cyclical process. But for now, we'll just feed it into our model and see where we're at, and then we can go back. So moment of truth, let's run. Let's fix this error. So I'm gonna fix using Copilot really quickly. Okay, so I'm not calling the model right. In GitHub, Copilot isn't trained on, obviously, GitHub models because it's newer than what it's been trained on, but hopefully, let's see. Okay, so it's using the context of, we'll accept it run. It's using the context of the notebook to help generate a response for me here. And amazing, okay. We've extended our content, so now it has our links. This is amazing. But I just chose GPT-4o Mini arbitrarily. We can leverage all of the models at our disposal in GitHub models to evaluate which one's the best for our use case, because each model has their own flavor, their own way of generating content and working with our queries and our content. So we can actually leverage the various models in the context here to evaluate, do we want more or less emojis? Do we want more or less words? All of those kinds of things. And so that's where we're at. And like I said, we can go back and we can clean up our data a little bit more. But I think now we're in a good spot to think about maybe we want to share this with colleagues. So I'm going to export this to both of these to Python scripts really quickly. And both of these untitled files are a little noisy. There's lots of markdown still in here, cell delineators, things are a little bit, it's organized like a notebook, and I want it to be organized as a Python script. So I'm gonna ask Copilot for help one more time, specifically Copilot edits, and I'm gonna add both of my untitled files to the working set, and then I'm gonna ask it for help to clean this up. Choose. Oh, sorry. Remove all cell delineators in Markdown, move all import statements to the top, and add documentation. Okay, so what this is going to do is Copilot Edits is going to take the prompt that I just gave it, and it's going to iterate over all of the documents in my working set. So apply those to all of the documents in the working set. And while it's helping me do some like tedious tasks here that I probably should be doing anyway, it's really interesting when we think about it at a larger level. So if you have a larger scale application with dependencies across a lot of files or directories, we can add those all into the working set, and then Copilot can help us make those changes in one full swoop. And so that's really cool. We should be able to start seeing these edits come in diff view, and we can make changes as we go, but we can also just accept it and then continue working from there, which is really interesting. So it's generating the edits, it's thinking really hard, and I do believe it would be faster, or it's faster doing it this than doing it all by hand and going through and adding all of the documentation. But it's a necessary thing that we have to do. So, but when we think about, if we zoom out on the process that we just performed, we evaluated models, we experimented and like went through this process in our data, and then we were able to get to a working solution and then get to a somewhat shareable solution that's well documented really efficiently. And I think these are all things that like resonate with us as well as like going through all of these steps and going through this like inner loop. And Copilot was able to help me every step of the way, which is really great. So yeah, you can see the diff view being generated in, and eventually I'll be able to hit accept and we'll have a really pretty variety of Python scripts. So yeah.
So, Courtney just showed you how you can actually use GitHub models to do model exploration. At GitHub Universe last week, we announced that not only do we have the OpenAI models, but we also have Anthropic's models, and we have Google Gemini models hosted in GitHub Model Marketplace. So really, in a sense, we have kind of all of the most popular models that are now being surfaced in GitHub Marketplace. The other thing that I also wanted to talk about is just being able to actually scale the model development in terms of being able to do evaluation as part of your CI process and experimentation as part of your continuous deployment process. So I'm just going to show you a super quick exploration of this. Hopefully this will start playing. I might need to press a button here. But basically what you can see is that we've added a user satisfaction feature, kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down. So I can actually ask Copilot to define a metric based on that thumbs up, thumbs down response to help me kind of create an experiment. And we're actually going to introduce that using a feature flag. And then what you can see is that we're also going to introduce a new prompt as a feature flag. And really changing prompts is just a modification of a text file. And then what you can see is that commit then goes into our continuous integration process, and the evaluation results are actually surfaced directly back into GitHub. Now, at this point, we've merged that pull request, and the experiment has started in production, and we're actually evaluating that as part of my continuous deployment workflow. And then those metrics are actually surfaced back in the context of GitHub as well, so that I can decide whether or not I actually want to roll that flight out to all of my users. In this case, this is kind of giving me some results that I'm not happy with, so this would result in a no ship decision, but really what we're trying to do here is to have a really streamlined evaluation and experimentation experience so that you can just do all of that in the context of VS Code and in GitHub to be able to kind of develop your models. So with that, I just want to kind of recap, really what I wanted to show you guys today is that we're just trying to make your lives easier as developers so that you don't have to leave your code editor and do everything that you want to do, and you can just focus on the code that, is unique to your scenario. And hopefully you guys saw all of that kind of being integrated into that environment. Our goal is, again, to remove the tedious and the repetitive and the mundane so that you guys can all really focus on the creative aspects of your job. So thank you very much for having me. And I think I'm going to be doing a fireside chat a little bit.